Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for visiting the museum today. My name is Stephen Fagin. I'm the curator here at the Sixth Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza. And this program is an extension of our museum's ongoing oral history project, which has recorded over 2,500 interviews with people from around the world about their memories of President Kennedy and the 1960s. And you're in for a treat today because we have two special guests who have a direct link to this special exhibit, 2 Days in Texas. You may have noticed those two shiny instruments back there, a trumpet and a trombone, and those two instruments were played by these two gentlemen on November 22nd, 1963, as members of the Eastern Hills High School Band in Fort Worth. They performed at the breakfast for President Kennedy on the morning of the assassination, and so their instruments played Hail to the Chief for the President for the last time. Please join me in welcoming John Sparks and William Cravens as our guests.
Hey.
Gentlemen, we're going to start by taking a look at what you looked like around this time back in 1963. I understand that you two have now known each other for about 65 years. Is that correct?
At least.
Pretty much, yeah.
You met in 1959, so yeah, 65 years, extraordinary. And you were both juniors at Eastern Hills High School at the time of the assassination, right?
That's right.
All right. So that morning, Eastern Hills goes to the Hotel Texas, where President Kennedy had spent the night for this Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce breakfast. But John, let's set the scene a little bit. As I understand it, Eastern Hills High School really didn't even know they were going to be performing until the afternoon before. Tell us a little bit about that.
Thursday afternoon, November 21st, I'm sitting in the 6th period English class, and the loudspeaker comes on. It's the principal telling all band members to report to the band hall immediately. Well, that's kind of weird because we all knew the football halftime show was in the can. So why does the band need to come down there? Well, we go down, and Ronnie Martin, our band director, is passing out music, and he tells us that the next morning we are to meet at the school at 6:30, load on buses to go downtown and play for the President of the United States. Now, TCU, Texas Christian University, was supposed to have played at that breakfast. But surprise, 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 even at that time, there was somewhat of a controversy in some circles about why the president was coming to Fort Worth. Was this a political event, or was it an official visit by the President of the United States? And there was a little, the TCU band was scheduled to play, but Ronnie Martin, our band director, was over at the TCU band hall. And the band directors, they'd swap music and all, for halftime shows or what have you. Ronnie Martin was listening outside Jim Jacobson's door, and he eavesdropped in on the conversation. And the chancellor of TCU was telling Jim Jacobson, the band director, that they were pulling out. They would not be playing at the breakfast. Well, Ronnie Martin, thinking on his feet, he went around the corner, got to a telephone, he called a friend of his that was in the Secret Service and also he'd been doing some Democratic Party work. And Ronnie Martin said, "You don't know it, but tomorrow you're not going to have a band. Do you want a band? I got a band." And so the guy thinks for a minute. Okay. So Ronnie Martin goes back to our high school and talks to old Sugar Bob, that was our principal, and he says, I got the band. We're gonna play for the breakfast. Well, you think I better call administration, Billy? And the principal picks up the phone, and Mr. Martin's saying, "Oh Lord!" And so the principal says, "Now is this a political event?" And Ronnie Martin says, "Well, he's the president of the United States." "Oh, we'll do it." So he slams down the receiver and didn't bother to even check with the ad building. The next morning, we're down there at the Hotel Texas.
Wow. This is a picture of you guys in your band uniforms, and we can see John. He's on the
horn rim glasses,
second row on the far left. His glasses
Yeah.
there. This is the trumpet section.
Oh yeah.
You played trumpet and you played trombone in that band. So that morning we have President Kennedy here. Next to him, of course, wearing the hat, that's Vice President Lyndon Johnson. Behind Kennedy is Governor of Texas John Connally, and Fort Worth Congressman Jim Wright, very instrumental in planning Kennedy's visit to the city. Kennedy spoke outside in the parking lot before going into the ballroom for the breakfast. Now, William, your story is actually quite interesting because while band students like John had to board the bus at 6:30 in the morning to go down there, you got to sleep in a little bit because you had a special consideration.
A little bit. I had my dad had tickets to the Chamber of Commerce meeting and or banquet or breakfast, whatever you want to call it. And I thought, well, first of all, I don't really want to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go over to the band hall. I can get up a lot later and go sit and have breakfast because none of those people are going to get any breakfast.
Right.
So they rode the bus, and I was fortunate enough to have a car, and I drove it down there. So I had breakfast with my dad, and then when it got time to assemble up to play the instruments and whatnot, I just simply went over there.
So you're the only Eastern Hills High School student that actually ate breakfast that morning.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Well, in the interest of full disclosure, the drum major of the band, a woman named Vicki Reese, after the breakfast was over, went and stole an uneaten or partially eaten breakfast roll off the president's plate. And she kept it in her refrigerator for 40 years till it turned a bunch of black gunk. So she got a little bit of the breakfast.
She got breakfast but didn't eat the breakfast.
There you go.
She just saved
Save it as a souvenir.
Was the breakfast good?
Not very memorable. It was, cold scrambled eggs and some bacon.
Anybody want to wager a guess at how much a ticket cost for that breakfast? Anybody got any idea? $5. No. 3.
Tickets were available to members of the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, basically, and their guests, things like
Sure.
that. Not everybody could come in off the street and buy one of those $3 tickets.
That's correct.
There were about 2,000 people in that ballroom eating breakfast that morning to see the president. And at the very far back, this is a picture showing the full ballroom. And this is really one of the only pictures that exist that shows the Eastern Hills High School Band. If you look up in the upper right corner, and I'm going to zoom in here, there's the band. You can just make out those shiny tubas at the back of the room. Unfortunately, they never appear in the TV footage. No close-up pictures are known to exist, but they were there, and John and William were back there in that cluster of band kids. We're going to watch a couple of different clips from the breakfast, some rare footage you don't often see from the morning of the assassination, and we're going to start with the president's arrival and that performance of Hail to the Chief. So we're going to take a look at that and listen to the smooth sounds of the Eastern Hills High School Band here.
When the president walks in, they will play Hail to the Chief. Here comes the president. As you may have noticed, Mrs. Kennedy did not enter with the president. So far, we have no indication of where she may be. And I can tell you from where we are standing, there are quite a few ladies who appear to be quite disappointed that Mrs. Kennedy is not here. I am sure that if she does not appear, the president will explain the reason for her absence. But we think perhaps perhaps the president was delayed, he may have changed his suit coat when he entered the building from the parking lot attendant appearance across the street. He was quite damp from the rain. He was the only member of the official party that did not wear a raincoat. But as he walked by me here, I noticed that his coat was dry and there were no rain spots on it, so he may have gone to his suite to change the suit coat.
Really extraordinary that we're able to sit here 60 years later, listening to that band play, seeing those instruments that played that song with the two gentlemen who played those instruments. It's a remarkable thing indeed. How does it make you guys feel looking at that piece of footage 60 years ago and remembering what it was like to be in that ballroom?
Well, one of the things that I'm struck by is the fact that you can barely hear the band because of all the applause. I've used that footage for a couple of projects of my own, and I always dub in Hail to the Chief by another band so you can hear the music.
So after Hail to the Chief, you guys went into, I guess, Texas Our Texas.
Yeah, the state song, Texas Our Texas is state song in Texas, and we played that.
Yeah. Did you know that one already, or was that one you had to practice ahead of time?
They passed it out, I think.
Yeah, I passed it out the day before.
You know,
I mean, it's not a hard song to play.
no, it's
But Hail to the Chief, that was really the first time you had played that.
that, and I don't know if you caught it, but right before you go into Hail to the Chief, there's a thing called ruffles and flourishes. Dun 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 dun. There are four of them. The president of the United States gets four of them. So anytime the president appears, you hear four ruffles and flourishes, and then you hear Hail to the Chief.
John, you did a story, I guess, a year or two ago on the local news where you actually played your trumpet again about
Oh,
58,
Lord.
59 years after the assassination.
We am not talking about that. Neither one of us really have touched our instruments since that year. I did not. I was a junior. I did not stay in the band in my senior year. I figured after you play for the president of the United States, you couldn't get a better gig than that, and I was going to get out. But I haven't really not touched my trumpet since that time. That's a long time.
Well, since it's in a case, we won't ask you to perform.
No, you don't want to hear it. You don't drive these people away.
So the announcer actually mentioned Mrs. Kennedy's absence, and she was fashionably late. She showed up a few minutes later to even more thunderous applause than the president received. We're going to watch that clip of her coming in, and you'll get to hear the band play again. You'll barely be able to hear them. What are they going to be playing, John?
Everything's Coming Up Roses from the musical Gypsy.
Was that a spontaneous
Well,
thing?
we were playing show tunes at the halftime show, and Everything's Coming Up Roses was one of those. So Ronnie Mark would say, Roses, and we all had it memorized. And so it was kind of ironic because later in the day you see the pictures of Jackie with those roses, and but that's the reason we played it. That was the nearest thing he could come up with, I guess, to bring her in on.
We're going to take a look at Mrs. Kennedy's arrival, and you'll notice as she makes her way around to the table, the Texas Boys Choir, these boys that are all dressed alike, get pretty excited. A few of them are jumping up and down, trying to get a good look at the First Lady. Let's take a look at that clip.
Now is an event that I know all of you have been waiting for. They know what I mean.
As you can tell from the reaction, that's Mrs. Kennedy coming in. She's been standing outside in the kitchen waiting for the introduction of the guests at the head table to be completed. Now she is moving up to the front of the ballroom, mounting the dais. For the ladies in the audience, she's wearing a pink outfit trimmed in black. If I knew more about it, I'd tell you the kind of material. It looks like a nubby material, wool of some type. And with the chilly weather outside today, this is probably very appropriate. There's some very happy women here today who made the trip down to see her, and now they've seen her.
2 years ago, I said that, introduced myself in Paris by saying that I was the man who had accompanied Mrs. Kennedy to Paris. I'm getting that same sensation as I travel around Texas. Nobody wonders what Lyndon and I wear. But we...
So, which of these two were you most excited to see that day in person, President or Mrs. Kennedy?
Well, I was certainly more impressed with President Kennedy when he walked in. He was a very statuesque man, very sure of himself. You could tell that he had a lot of leadership qualities, and was a very, very strong thinker. But when Mrs. Kennedy came in, the crowd, as the president said, even became more interested in her than him.
Once the breakfast, the eating concluded, did you go and sit with the band for the rest of that event, or did you go back to the table?
No,
with your
I
dad?
stayed with the band.
Okay. All right. It's interesting, we often lose sight in seeing some color still photographs that people on television were seeing these black and white images of the president. You guys got to see them in color that day in real life. Did anything stand out that maybe surprised you compared to the way they looked on TV?
Yes. They were in color. Television is all black and white. He had ruddy cheeks. I've read subsequently that it's maybe a side effect from he suffered from Addison's disease, but he was tanned. He's healthy, full of vigor. And Mrs. Kennedy, on television, she had led Charles Collingwood, I think it was, on a tour of the White House. She was very soft-spoken and demure, and I had pictured, because of that, that she would be a woman of slight build. But she was a large woman, nice figure, but she was much larger in life than what the feeling I got when I saw her on television.
So the president obviously spoke at the breakfast, and then as things were winding down, Raymond Buck, who was president of the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, we heard him speak a moment ago, he gave the president a gift. So we're going to take a look at that. This is our last clip of footage from the breakfast. This is the gift that was bestowed upon President Kennedy at the conclusion.
Mr. President, your visit with us in Fort Worth today, the things you have said have refreshed and renewed our appreciation of your great leadership and courage. You have brought rain to moisten our pastures and our fields. You have brought sunshine in our hearts. We know that you don't wear a hat. We couldn't let you leave Fort Worth without providing you with some protection against the rain.
I'll put it on in the White House on Monday. If you'll come up there, you'll have a chance to see it there.
Of course, a humorous comment at the breakfast that morning, but very poignant considering that he never made it back in just a couple of hours. He would be shot in Dallas. Let's move on to that. John, you got to see him one more time, and this is as they're leaving the Hotel Texas. You jumped in your car because you had separate transportation.
That's right. I was out of there.
But John and the other students riding the bus, you had the chance to see him out front, very similar to this photograph here.
Ronnie Martin told the members of the band, he said, take a break, go down. If you want to watch the motorcade pull out, go ahead, but be back in our bus at such and such a time. So I went down there, and I was about as close as I'm sitting here to Stephen. I could have reached out and touched the president. That's what amazed me. that there's no security really. There was a car ahead of them that had some pretty good sized artillery in it, but I just could not believe it. I was, as close as we are sitting here to the President of the United States. I'll never forget it.
Well, let's talk about what happened shortly thereafter. William, we'll start with you. Where were you when you found out about the assassination right here in Dealey Plaza?
Well, I had gotten to my car, made my way back to school, but had found myself there about the time of Miss Nash's English class, for which I was not prepared. So I sat out of my car and listened to the radio for a few minutes, and that's when it came on the radio that the president had been shot. It was, a shock of unbelievable proportion. I think to everybody. I mean, the whole country was in mourning for several days after that. Everything was shut down everywhere. Nothing was open. People were just concerned about what they just witnessed. And as John said, there was really very little security. You could walk up and down those fire escapes, when other things were going on, and anybody could have walked in with anything they wanted to and started firing away. It certainly wouldn't get away with that sort of security today.
That's correct.
But it was, it was a shock. We all went into school and became, more aware of some of the other things that had taken place and so forth. But school was pretty much dismissed after that.
Yeah.
We didn't go. That was a different time of the world. John and I grew up in a neighborhood of people who came back from the war or had worked for the government during the war or whatnot. And so everything was rather homogeneous. All the homes were about the same price. They were all occupied by people of the same age and so forth and so on. And we were all the same children. Nobody ever locked their door.
Sure.
So it was a whole different era of trust that we certainly have not been aware of these days, when people can walk into a school and start shooting it up.
Yep.
Certainly, I don't think today a high school band and all its students could be drafted the afternoon before a presidential breakfast and just go straight in with no metal detectors or anything like that, with your instruments and just set up to play.
Probably not.
Yeah. John, how did you find out about the assassination?
I was at lunch. Fourth period, I had an American history class, and we had what they call a split lunch period. They had 3 lunch periods: first, second, third. And my class, we went for a half hour to the history class, then to lunch, then back to finish up the history class. So I'm sitting at lunch, and again, the principal I referred to earlier broke in on the loudspeaker and said that many of the students were aware that the president had been in Fort Worth that morning. In fact, members of the band had played and seen him that morning, and said that there had been reports out of Dallas that the president had been shot. At that time, not mortally wounded, but he then turned on the radio, and for the rest of the day, we went and finished our classes, passed from 4th period to 5th period class to 6th period. But all we do is go in and sit, and we would listen to the radio feed over the loudspeaker. And then when we got at the end of the day, I remember going home and then glued to the television for the next 4 days because it was nonstop, no commercials. Back then, you only had 3 networks and a PBS station, or they called it ETV back then. But it was all, the networks pulled all commercial programming, all commercials, and you had round the clock, and much of it originated from Dallas.
In case you've ever wondered how historic artifacts eventually make their way into museums like ours, William Craven's trombone had a remarkable journey from the Hotel Texas on the morning of the assassination to that case over there in our gallery. William, tell us a little bit about the journey that trombone took.
Well, first of all, it was stolen out of the back seat of my car. Of course, you thought you'd never find anything again like that, but it ended up in a pawn shop. And I think my dad was able to pay $50 and get it back. So then I continued to use it for a short period of time. I too wasn't in the band beyond that. So it went into a closet at my mother's house in Fort Worth. And my mother lived there from 1952 until 2009, the same house. So she'd had some difficulty with this house, and I rebuilt it for her. And so we moved everything out of her house and moved it all back in. And I came across this trombone. I didn't think anything about it anymore, but after she passed away in 2009 and we were cleaning out the house, I took it back to Eastern Hills High School and gave it to the band director. And I told him the story that this trombone had played with Kennedy, blah, blah, blah. So he said, "Thank you very much." I didn't think any more about it. Then I guess you had a discussion with John and had found out that John, as most people probably don't know in this audience, is a very well-respected news personality and producer for many years, has many awards, and therefore he can tell a story a hell of a lot better than I can. But he, as I understood, he had some reluctancy in sharing his trumpet with you. And so I got to thinking about it. I said, well, they need a horn up there that played for the president. Maybe I can find it. So I went back through to the Eastern Hills High School. I spent several days just chewing away at trying to find out who to talk to about what and where. Finally, I ran across a lady who had just retired as the chief band person for all the independent school districts in Fort Worth. And I called her and I talked to her, and she said, "I know where that trombone is," because the story followed that trombone. And it ended up in Dunbar High School, which when John and I were in school, the schools were segregated. And consequently, Dunbar was a black high school, always had been. And so I thought about it for a minute. I said, why not just leave it there? And so we talked about it a little bit more, and she insisted that I get it to you. And she found it, called me one day and said, "Meet me at this church where I'm going to be doing work, and I'll give it to you." So she did, and that's when I provided it for you. But it was really a long way around to finally find its way back here. It could have just as easily ended up in a dump at some point.
Yeah, and it was used by other band students after your donation,
Yes,
right?
right.
Yeah, so students played that instrument not knowing that that instrument had been
Until
used.
2000. Oh well, I don't know. So when did I give it to you? Last
You
year,
gave
2
it to
years
us
ago?
last year, yeah.
Well, yeah.
So 60 years later, it ends up here at the Sixth Floor Museum. We're very grateful to you
Sure,
for donating that.
absolutely.
And John put his trumpet on loan to us. And
Yeah.
maybe one of these days, it will
Yeah,
also be
probably.
part of our collection.
There was a certain amount of shame involved.
Good chance of that. My wife said, "I get dibs on the horn when he goes," and I said, "Okay, well, whatever."
But we do have this man to thank for something else. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. This is original news footage from the ABC affiliate here in Dallas, WFAA-TV. And as William mentioned, John, for over 40 years, was a producer, broadcaster with the local TV stations. And you saved this original Kennedy assassination footage. If you've ever seen the original announcement, announcing that President Kennedy's been shot here on local TV, an interview with Abraham Zapruder, and first interview with eyewitnesses, Bill and Gail Newman, all of that footage was saved by this man. How did that happen?
Well, I was an intern at Channel 8 in the summer of 1968, and during those 3 months, I had discovered that footage. It was kept up in the production library with all the videotapes. It's a 2-inch videotape, by the way. It weighs a ton. That's 1 hour's worth that you're looking at. And I loved history. And so later, after I graduated and did my stint with Uncle Sam, I went to work there full time at the station. And forgot what year it was, but one day I walked in the back door and all the Kennedy's footage was on rollaway dollies loaded up in the back docks. And I said to Bill Marmer, the guard, I said, what's going on here? Oh, we're getting rid of this stuff. I said, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And they said, well, you have to go talk to the manager about that. And I did. I told him, I said, look, that's history. It ain't going nowhere. And if you don't want it, I'm taking it home with me and I'll keep it till the day comes when I find somebody that'll appreciate it. And so they got to think about it and they decided they'd save it. I'm glad they did.
Yeah, and now all of those original 2-inch videotapes are in our collection here at the museum. So thank you for saving this remarkable historic footage for posterity. Rather than do yes, absolutely. Rather than do a formal Q&A today, these two gentlemen have graciously agreed to sit here for a few minutes. If you have questions, you're welcome to come up and meet them and ask them individually. I hope you'll join me one more time in thanking John Sparks and William Cravens for being our special guests.
Thank you.